The Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander. Book 3, The Castle of Llyr. Chapter 14, The Empty Book.
"Hello, hello," called Rune, hastening to the companions. "I've never been so surprised in my life. I didn't mean to disobey orders, but after I crawled out the passage, I just couldn't leave you here to be cooked up. I simply couldn't do it. I kept thinking to myself that none of you would have gone running off." He hesitated and looked anxiously at Taran. "You aren't angry, are you?" "You saved our lives," replied Taran. He clasped Rune's hand. "I only reproach you for risking your own."
"Joy and happiness!"
cried Gurgi.
"Poor tenderhead is spared from stampings and trappings, and kind master is safe from brewings and stirrings."
"But the most amazing thing was the bauble," Prince Rune went on, beaming proudly. "The light didn't go out, even after I got hold of it. Astonishing!" He stared curiously at the golden sphere, whose rays had already begun to dim, and handed it back to Taran. "I don't know what happened. This suddenly started getting brighter and brighter, all by itself. Unbelievable!"
"It's the one thing that stopped him,"
said Fluider. Hands on his hips, the bard was looking down at the prostrate form of Glue.
"He'd been here so long, he couldn't stand the brightness. The repulsive little grub! There, I'm calling him little again,"
he added.
"But I still say, for a giant, he's remarkably small-natured."
He knelt and peered at Glue's face.
"He's had a good crack on the head, but he's still alive."
Fluider put a hand to his sword.
"We might be wise to, make sure he doesn't wake up."
"Leave him," said Taran, staying Fluider's hand. "I know he tried to do us ill, but I still pity the wretched creature and mean to ask Dalbin if he can help him."
"Very well," said
Fluider with some reluctance.
"He wouldn't have done as much for us, but a flam is merciful. Quick now, let's be off."
"How did you climb down?" Taran asked Rune. "Did you find vines long enough to reach us?" Prince Rune's jaw dropped and he blinked with alarm. I'm afraid I've done it again," he murmured. "I didn't climb. I jumped. I somehow never thought of getting out again. Surprising. This simply never occurred to me. I'm sorry. They put us right back where we were." "Not quite," replied Taran to the despondent prince. "We can hoist you up as we did before, and this time you can lower something for the rest of us. But we must make haste."
"There's no need for us to stand on each other's heads,"
Fluider suddenly cried.
"I see an easier way. Look there."
He pointed upward to where a large crack yawned in the cavern wall. A shaft of sunlight fell over the stones, and fresh air whistled through the crevice.
"We can thank Glue for that. With all his roaring and screaming, he's shaking the rocks loose. We shall be out in no time. Bless the repulsive little monster. He said he wanted to make Mona tremble," he added. "And great villain! So he did, after a fashion."
The companions hurried to the wall of the cave and began picking their way through the rubble of broken stones. Prince Rune, however, halted abruptly and began fumbling it with his jacket. "I say, that's surprising," he cried. "I know I put it there." With an anxious frown, he began searching his garments once again. "Hurry," Taran called. "We dare not be here when Glue comes to his senses. What are you looking for?" "My book," answered Rune. "Where can it be? It must have fallen out while I was crawling through that hole. Or perhaps—" "Leave it," Taran urged. "It is worthless. You've risked your life once. Don't risk it again for a book of empty pages." "It was a handsome keepsake," said Rune. "Then it would be useful. It can't be far. Go ahead, I'll join you. They shan't be a moment." He turned and trotted back toward the tunnel. "Rune!" Taran shouted, racing after him. The Prince of Mona disappeared into the chamber. Taran found him on hands and knees, groping through the rough floor. "Splendid!" cried Rune, glancing over his shoulder. "That little light is what I needed. Now, surely it's bound to be here. Let me see. First, where was I climbing up? If it dropped out then, by all rights, it should be close to the wall." Taran was determined, if need be, to lay hold of the prince and drag him bodily from the cell which had so nearly become a tomb. He strode forward just as Rune gave a cry of triumph. There it is, shouted the prince. He picked up the book and carefully examined it. I hope it wasn't damaged, he remarked. All that scrambling about might have torn the pages. No, it seems... He stopped and shook his head in dismay. I say, that's a shame. It's ruined. All covered with scratches and markings. Whatever could have happened? He put the leather-bound volume into Taran's hand. Look, he said, what a pity. Every page is marred. It's really useless now. Taran was about to cast the book aside and carry out his first intention of collaring the prince, but his eyes widened at the sight of the pages. Rune, he whispered, these are more than scratchings. It is carefully written. I had thought the pages empty. So had I, said Rune. What could... Fluider called out, urging them to hasten. Taran and Prince Rune left the chamber. Gurgi had already reached the opening in the cavern ceiling and was beckoning to them. The book we found in Glue's hut, Taran began.
Don't worry about Glue's property. Worry about Glue, said Fluider. It's beginning to stir. Move along or we'll still end up in one of his potions.
The sun had just risen, but it was bright and warming after the dark cavern. The companions gratefully breathed the fresh springtime air. Gurgi shouted joyfully and raced on ahead. He soon returned with good tidings. The river lay not too far away. The companions set out for it with all speed. As they strode along, Taran held up the volume to Fluider. There is a deep mystery in this. I cannot read the writing. The script is ancient, but how it came there...
After what we've been through,
replied the bard, glancing at the pages.
I can understand you're wanting to jest, but this is hardly the moment for it.
Jest? I do not jest. Taran started as he pointed at the volume again. The pages were empty as they had always been. The writing, he stammered. It's gone.
My friend, said the bard gently, your eyes have played you false. At the river, we'll put cool cloths on your head and you'll feel much better. It's quite understandable, considering the darkness, the shock of merely being boiled.
I know what I have seen, Taran protested, even in the cave, even in the dim light of the bauble. It's true, put in Rune, who had been following their talk. I saw it myself. There's no mistake. The bauble was shining straight on the pages. The bauble, Taran cried. Wait, can it be? Hurriedly, he drew out the sphere while the companions halted and watched him silently. As the light blossomed in his hand, Taran held it so that its rays bathed the pages in a golden glow. The writing sprang into sight, sharp and clear. Astonishing! Cried Rune. The most amazing thing I've seen in my life! Taran crouched on the turf, held the bauble close to the book, and with trembling fingers turned leaf after leaf. The curious tracing crowded every page. The bard gave a long, low whistle. What does this mean, Fluider? Taran asked. He raised his head and looked with concern at the bard. The bard's face had paled.
What it means, in my opinion, said Fluider, is that we should get rid of the book instantly. Drop it in the river. I regret to say I can't read it. I could never manage to learn all the secret scripts and ancient letters, but I recognize enchantment when I see it.
He shuddered and turned away.
I'd rather not even look at it, if you don't mind. Not that it frightens me. Yes, it makes me feel acutely uneasy, and you know my views on meddling.
If Glue spoke the truth, it comes from a place of enchantments, Taran said. But what can it tell us? I shall not destroy it, he added, returning the book to his jacket. I can't explain. I feel as though I had touched a secret. It's strange, like a moth that brushes your hand and flutters away again.
Ahem,
said Fluider, casting a nervous glance at Taran.
If you insist on carrying that thing with you, would you oblige me? Nothing personal, you understand. But I would appreciate it if you'd stay a few paces away.
Midday was long past when the companions reached the riverbank, but they rejoiced at their good fortune. The remains of the raft were still there. They set to work hastily to repair it. Prince Rune, in better spirits than ever, labored unstintingly. For a time, Taran had forgotten the Prince of Mona was to be Eilonwe's betrothed. Now the sad thought returned to him as he helped Rune knot new vines around the raft. You should be proud of yourself, Taran said quietly. Did you seek to prove yourself a true prince? You have done so, Rune, son of Rudolum. Why, perhaps that's so, replied Rune, as though the idea had never occurred to him. But it's a curious thing. It doesn't seem one bit as important as it did. Astonishing, but true. The sun had begun to dip by the time the raft was ready. Taran, who had grown more and more restless as the day waned, urged the companions to press on rather than wait the night on shore, and they clambered aboard. Twilight still fell over the valley, and the Allah ran in swift silver ripples under the rising moon. The shore lay silent, flanked by brooding hills. In the middle of the raft, Gurgi curled up like a muddy ball of leaves. Beside him, the Prince of Mona slept and snored peacefully, a smile of contentment on his round face. Taking the first watch, Taran and Fluider guided the awkward craft as it rapidly floated seaward. They spoke little. Fluider had not entirely lost his disquiet over the strange book. Taran's thoughts were for the morrow, where he hoped to bring the companions closer to the end of their search. Once again, fear and doubt made him wonder if he had chosen wisely. Even if Eilonwy had been taken to Caer Callur, he had no cause to believe Mag, or Arkin, still held her there. So little was known for certain. The book and its meaning, even the nature of Eilonwy's bauble, were more riddles added to so many others. Why, he murmured, why is the writing clear only when the bauble shines on it? And why did it light for Rune when it had never done so before? Why did it light for me, for that matter?
As a bard,
answered Fluider,
I know a great deal about these enchanted devices, and I can tell you.
At the narrow end of the harp, a string tinkled as it snapped in two.
Ah, yes,
said Fluider.
The fact is, I know very little about them. Eilonwy, of course, has the gift of making it light when she pleases. She's half an enchantress, you know, and the bauble does belong to her. For someone else, I wonder. And I'm only guessing, mind you. I wonder if it might have to do with, how shall I put it? Not even thinking about it, or about yourself. What I mean,
Fluider went on.
In the cavern, when I tried to make it light, I was saying to myself, if I can do this, if I can find the way for us.
Perhaps, Taran said quietly, watching the moon-white riverbank slip past them. Perhaps you have the truth of it. At first, I felt like you did. Then I remember thinking of Eilonwy, only of her, and the bauble showed its light. Prince Rune was ready to lay his life down. His thoughts were for our safety, not at all for his own. And because he offered the greatest sacrifice, the bauble glowed brightest for him. Can that be its secret? To think more for others than yourself?
That would seem to be one of its secrets, at least, replied Fluider. Once you've discovered that, you've discovered a great secret indeed, with or without the bauble.
The hills had flattened and gave way to low fields of sedge. A scent of brine and brackish water reached Taran's nostrils. Ahead, the river widened, flowing into a bay, and beyond that to an even greater expanse of water. To his right, on the far side of towering rocks, Taran heard the rush of surf. Reluctantly, he decided they dared go no farther until dawn. While Fluid aroused Gurgi and Prince Rune, Taran pulled the raft ashore. The companions settled themselves amid a tall clump of reeds, and Gurgi opened his wallet of food. Taran, still restless, walked to a hillock and peered toward the sea.
Keep to the shadows,
said the voice of Gwydion.
Arkin's eyes are sharp.